You're listening to Real Talk Texas with local expert Steve Hakes. Now, here's Steve.
If you've just tuned in, you're listening to Real Talk Texas on 570 AM KLIF. And we're having a conversation right now with the with Détente Collaborative Mediation. You can reach them. You can find out more about them on divorcemediationtexas.com, or just reach out to our show here at realtalktexas.com. Hit contact and send me a note and say, hey, I'd like to talk with Stacey and Linda. I may need their help. What we ended the last segment, we just were talking about just the general what collaborative mediation is in the courts or out of the courts, and how that has been put together, Stacey and Linda. And I'd like to continue that conversation. We can kind of go into more of what makes you guys different than the average. Hey, I'm calling up. I've had it. We're going to call it quits. We've tried to work it out. Maybe we've gone to therapy. Maybe we haven't. But we're at that point in the road where we've made that very, very difficult decision that's going to affect us, the rest of our life, and our family, our children. And now we've made a decision to separate. And what one of my questions that I want to cover in this too, and I want you to cover this, is, does this work for everybody? Who shouldn't? Where is the line in the sand where it says, okay, they're just so far away from each other, this is not going to work? And do you make that decision up front, or as a listener, how do I handle that? Whether I should call or not, or just call an attorney and pay a fee and to get this thing done. So
what traditionally happens when people are going through the grief process and have decided to end their marriage is part of the grief process is anger. So traditionally people are angry and they go out and want to hire the biggest gun that they can find. And I love that Stacey has named the process Détente, because I'd like her to tell you a little bit about what that actually means, if you would.
Détente is usually, it's a fancy French word, but it's used usually to describe the time when two countries are about to blow themselves off the face of the earth. And it refers to calling a truce in order to take a time out to negotiate a peaceful settlement. And I thought, wow, how many couples reach the point where they have just absolutely had enough? And they are exactly at that point that Linda was mentioning, where they are ready to go find the biggest, meanest attorneys they possibly can, because they believe that's what they have to have and they don't know there are other options. There are a lot of folks who really don't understand that if you own a house together, if you have children together, particularly if you've been married for the average 20.8 years, your lives are completely entwined financially, emotionally, and with your kids. And that it takes both of those people to unwind that and untie that knot. So they really are going to have to work together to solve the divorce issues and the terms of that. What I found as a mediator, and let me tell you what mediation is, because I think we need to talk about that. Mediation is a process where parties, whether they're spouses or people involved in other kinds of conflict, come together with a neutral third person who has no interest in the outcome of their case or their dispute, who sits them down and says, look, I'm going to help you guys negotiate this. I'm going to help you develop options for settlement, test those options. We can gather all the information that you need so that you can make good decisions. And I'm going to facilitate your communication so you guys can talk about what's really important to you and find the best solution to the problem that you have. The difference between being a mediator, even though I'm an attorney, when I put my mediator hat on, I'm being neutral. And what that means is I don't provide legal advice. Because if I were wearing my lawyer hat, I could only represent one of those people. So folks who go through divorce cannot have one lawyer represent two people. It's unethical for us to do that.
So no one's trying to find the middle ground. They're each defending their client because that's their obligation.
Exactly. And the only way that I've ever found that I can help both spouses is to be a mediator. Because again, if I'm representing one of them, I can only help that one person. And my ethical obligations as an attorney tell me that I cannot have an appearance of impropriety, that I am sacrificing the representation of my client to help the other one. So if I take off my lawyer hat and put on a mediator hat, I get to sit with both parties and I get to help them both because I'm not providing legal advice. I can provide legal information, so I can tell them what the law says. I can tell them all about alimony. I can tell them about child support. I can tell them, what might happen down at the courthouse, but I can't say, you wife should do this or you husband should do that.
And that makes this a completely client-driven process. Stacey being able to be a neutral allows the clients to decide what's important to them, what they want to decide on, and find their agreements. The only people driving the boat are the clients. They decide what's important to them.
And the real beauty of the collaborative mediation process is that in my experience with collaborative, I've seen that there are pieces of that work beautifully. And I decided that I wanted to have a private and confidential process. And mediation is that by statute in Texas. So the conversations there are private and confidential and do not get revealed elsewhere unless they are independently discoverable in a litigation process. We can't have things be hidden in mediation that would normally come out in litigation anyhow.
When you say private, I mean, one of the things, if you've just joined us, you're listening to Real Talk Texas, and we've got two of our real experts from our panel when it comes to separation and divorce, and from Détente Collaborative Mediation. And I just wanted to really just ask, you say private, I kind of visualize this, like I'm at odds with my spouse, and are we going to go into mediation? Are we going in the same room together talking, or do we have separate meetings? How does that really work?
I'm going to let Linda address some of this, but let me tell you a little bit about the structure. When we do this kind of mediation, and I call it collaborative mediation, because it is both spouses coming together to try to discuss those things that are very important to them. The other reason why I call it collaborative mediation is because Linda and I do it together. It's the only process we're aware of in Texas. I think we're the only ones who do what we do around here. We bring together the legal skills of an attorney and the communication and family dynamic skills of Linda, who's a family counselor. So when the folks come to us, they come in together, and sometimes they're not even talking to each other, or they haven't even seen each other for a long time. All they need is the desire to try to reach agreement. There can be all kinds of conflict, and we can deal with the conflict. As long as they have that desire to try to reach agreement, we can help them. Now, the beauty of what Linda does is that she provides help with their communication. And that's one of the unique things that we offer, because lawyers are taught to speak for people. We're not taught to be quiet.
And you're speaking for Linda right now.
I am.
So it's
but I would like
please,
to throw Linda in there and explain, tell me a story. How does this really work?
Well, it's very important to us that our clients are at least willing to try to find agreements. But a lot of times by the time they get to us, they haven't spoken in a very long time. So my role as a communications facilitator is to teach them a different way to talk with one another, and that includes building in safety. It's real important that when we're talking that we all try to hear one another, and that there is no judgment, blame, or criticism, that we stay away from the past. We kind of build in some rules for communication about what works and what doesn't work. So if they haven't talked for a while and they learn to talk to each other in safer ways, then they're going to have more success down the road, because our process isn't just about getting them divorced. It's about transitioning a family from being a married couple to being able to work together as mom and dad. So our hope for them is that they will, for years to come, be able to talk about what their concerns are using our truce process, talk about what their concerns are, request important information, understand their options, compare their options, and engage in negotiation. So our hope is that they will be able to use the methods of safe communication. If we're dealing with a family with a 1-year-old, they're going to have different issues when that child is 16. And we want them to always be able to work together as mom and dad. I'm a child of divorce as well. And I've got some family members who have been through horrendous situations where communication didn't happen or happened through the children, and that's very unhealthy. So teaching them a safer communication model to help them transition is critical if they're going to be successful as parents. Sometimes that's hard enough to do when you live in the same household. It's even harder when you're divorced. So they really need some tools to do that.
And I wonder if anybody really gets that service, or that gets to that level, if if each spouse picks up the phone, calls an attorney, and says, "Hey, defend me, cover me, make sure that I'm taken care of. I'll take care of all this later, but get this divorce done, and let's just protect my assets and things like that." And we'll cover that a little bit later about assets and how those are, how things that you do now as part of this can affect you when it comes to when you want to do other things later in your life. But Stacey?
And Steve, you've hit on a very good point. One of the ways people can differentiate what we do from litigation is a concentration on proving past events to blame someone, to find fault. Mediation, in the way that we do it, is very family focused and future focused. We're looking to the future and only use past events if they have to have some sort of relevance to what it means to the future. We don't do therapy. Linda does not do therapy in these sessions. She's a communication coach. So we're looking completely in a different direction than where litigation is going.
And we're conscious of the emotions and helping to manage those so they don't sabotage the communication.
Well, I really appreciate that. We're going to talk a little bit more about some of these topics and then move on to what happens, how this thing really wraps up at the end. You're listening to Real Talk Texas on AM 570 KLIF, and you're listening to our real experts from Détente Collaborative Mediation. You can reach them at our show at realtalktexas.com. Just go there and send me a note through Contact Me, and I'll put you in touch with Stacey and Linda.